Barbers, stylists, hairdressers of Reddit. Has anyone ever sat in your chair with a head so nasty that you didn't even want to touch them? What is your horror story? Long time ago, but I had to wash and cut a teenager that hadn't washed his hair in what looked like months. Salon policy was to wash after a men's cut and the smell was awful. After his cut, I tried to wet his hair in the shampoo bowl and the water just ran off his hair because of all the oil buildup. I had seen a lot during my years as a stylist, but that was the worst experience. Imagining water not being able to penetrate oily hair is the grossest thing I've heard of in this thread. Older ladies that came in for a wash and a water bath that had a helmet of hairspray of 4 weeks old was pretty normal. Had one client that had really bad psoriasis and no hairdresser wanted to help him. He was also very ashamed, so we made the deal that he could come in after closing time. It was really bad and most of the equipment, combs, clips, were disposed instead of disinfected. As someone with this condition, thank you for not turning him away. It's not contagious at all, but can freak the heck out of people. I've been lucky that when mine has been pretty bad on my scalp, my hairdressers were still okay with working with me, but I think the longer hair helps mask the problem a bit. My sister is a hairstylist and got scabies once from a kid. Apparently the mom knew the kid had it too, just didn't tell my sister until they were leaving. Yuck. My husband is a barber. One day he had a guy come in with dreads, wanting them all shaved off. He parted his dreads, looked at his scalp and noticed it was green. He touched it and saw it ripple. Asked the guy when he'd last washed his hair. He replied, about 3 years ago. My husband realized the guy's whole scalp was covered in a layer of pus. Sent him straight to A&E to have it drained and treated with antibiotics. Bye. Horror story of mine. I used to babysit for the neighborhood. One day I got these kids that were scratching at their heads after taking them outside, but because they were playing in the sandbox together, 13 and 8, I figured that there was sand in their hair and reminded them to shower when they got home. Go to get my hair done the next day. Hair was down to my mid-back and I asked for a short bob just below my ears. Halfway through, the hairdresser stops and loudly announces to everyone in the shop, people I knew were there, that she could not continue to cut my hair because I had lice. I was so embarrassed. You could have at least taken me to the side and explained instead of making me feel dirty. If I had known, I would have dealt with it, especially if someone was gonna be dealing with my hair. I still blush when I think back on it. Sound like the time a bank teller shouted at me. I couldn't hear her through the thick glass and tiny holes drilled for her voice that I had bounced to check. The entire lobby heard her because she not only turned on her little microphone, but shouted into it as well. My dad was a hairdresser before he passed. When I was young, I had really bad psoriasis on my scalp. My dad has been the only one to ever cut my hair. Passed 3 months ago, and I can't bring myself to get my hair cut, even though it's desperately needed, in my 25 years on this planet. And I can remember a few times sitting in his chair where he was literally combing and cutting out large chunks of dead, flaky skin. It was the most embarrassed I have ever been in front of him, because no matter how many topical remedies I tried, I couldn't get it to go away. Eventually grew out of the psoriasis, but I still hold on to this moment as one of my favorite moments, where the love my dad had for me really shone through. My mother was a hairdresser in the 1960s for Vidalsasson. During the time of the beehive, customers wouldn't wash their hair for weeks. They'd just keep spraying it to keep it in place as it was such a complicated do. This meant a lot of fleas, lice, and on one occasion cockroaches that had to be washed out. For some reason this never bothered my mother all that much, but hearing about it made sure I never, ever wanted any kind of hands-on customer service job. I used to work as a receptionist at a high-end salon. One day, a lady called and asked if we had anyone who specialized in cutting curly hair. I matched her up with someone, asked the standard questions, and made the appointment, which turned out to be for her granddaughter. When the family showed up, the mother and grandmother were white, and the granddaughter was African American. They obviously didn't know, and didn't bother to learn, how to take care of the girl's hair, because it was in a giant, waist-length ponytail that was completely matted. She also had a bit of a developmental disability, and they claimed she would not wash her hair herself. I could smell her as soon as she walked in, but when the stylist got her hair wet at the shampoo bowl, the smell quickly permeated the entire salon. It was like a punch to the gut. The hairstylist had to keep coming up front for fresh air. She said giant flakes sheets of dandruff and buildup were basically crusted to the girl's scalp and throughout her hair. The matted ponytail was the worst of it. What should have been a simple 45-minute service ended up taking over 4 hours. The girl looked great when she was done. I felt terrible for her because it was pretty obvious that her mom and grandma had no intention of keeping her hair maintained. I got the impression that they basically only took her for a haircut when things got completely out of control. I was horrified that they apparently weren't even bothering to wash her hair at home. They bought a bunch of products that the stylist recommended, but ended up returning everything a day or two later. That poor child. My hairdresser says she had one lady who brought her kid in for haircuts and the mom never brushed the kid's hair ever, so my hairdresser had to spend upwards of 45 minutes trying to comb the knots out of a squirming kid's hair. I think she eventually fired the client because it wasn't worth the cost of a kid's haircut to spend the better part of an hour just on combing. We had that happen in a salon that I worked in. Because of the way that the mom treated the little girl, we ended up calling CPS. I left that job before I ever saw any resolution, though. I think about that little girl all the time. I had a young man come in with his mother. He was about 8 years old and had tight curly hair. His mother asked me to shave down to a 0.00000, that is the shortest you can go with clippers. I said sure. It was my last cut of the day and I was eager to go home. I start the service and notice barely 1/3 RD in that he had a lice infestation under the tight curly hair. I mean, these guys were huge, probably why his mother needed me to shave it off. So, I discontinued the service and spent the next 3 hours disinfecting everything in sight. The boy's mother called the barbershop later to complain because I wouldn't finish shaving her son's hair. We tried to explain that it was illegal for us to continue the service as it might spread lice to others and recommended a specialty shop that could take care of this for them, but she demanded that it was because we were racist. That was fun. I once had to turn a lady away after she booked in for hair extension removal. The micro-bonded type your stylist should tell you last 3 months maximum. Nobody told this lady. They had been in for 7 months. My boss booked her in with me. The extensions weren't done in my salon. I took one look at it and told her I couldn't help. There was a chunk of hair about 6 inches wide that was matted with bits of hair glue, not what we use, poking out. To me, her options were shave it or cut it almost to the scalp. Some hairdressers shouldn't be allowed. Bit of a different horror story, but my stylist once had a woman with hair past her butt who wanted to donate everything to Locks of Love. Everything. This woman with hair down nearly to her thighs says she wants a pixie cut and is donating everything else. After checking multiple times to see that she was positive she wanted a pixie and not a short bob or anything, the stylist starts cutting. The woman sobbed the entire time, like shoulder shuddering sobs in the dressing chair with her sad little haircut cape on. Stylist kept asking if it was okay, but the woman was determined to help people with cancer and told her to keep going and to ignore her tears. My stylist said it was the most awkward experience of her life. Other customers kept coming in and probably assumed she was maiming this poor woman. Side story, when you donate hair to Locks of Love, the hair doesn't go to cancer patients, it goes to make high-end wigs that are sold, and the proceeds of the sale go to buy wigs for cancer patients. Not that this is bad, just the fact. One of the first shops I worked in, there were 2 individuals who would regularly come in for cuts. Both of them were physically so dirty it changed their skin tone, and they absolutely reeked of cat pee. Being close to them made my eyes water, and it was extremely difficult to breathe as the smell of ammonia was just plain overwhelming. We never turned them away, and we were always as polite as we could be. But frick if those haircuts didn't feel like they lasted 3 hours. I've always heard that meth users often give off an ammonia cat pee smell. I'm not a stylist for humans, but I do groom dogs, and I have seen some things that make me want to never give these dogs back to their owners. My worst experience was when I had someone bring in their 2-year-old Shih Tzu. She was down as a mini groom. That's where we only trim the face, feet, and private areas, so I'm thinking this will be an easy groom. Wrong. This woman walked in with her dog wrapped in a towel because she doesn't want to touch him, and I can see why the dog is a mess. The dog's hair is one solid mat including his face, and there is a deep giant hole in his coat where the poop has exploded through his hair, meaning he has been pooping into his own hair for so long the buildup finally busted a hole through his hair. So I have to shave him before he can get any kind of bath, so I find a spot I can break through and start shaving. This is very bad on my tools, by the way. Once I finally release this dog from his mat prison, which came off almost in one solid piece, he ends up having so many sores on his skin. He was shaking his head so much he was starting to cause hematomas on his ears. His butthole was infected and he is infested with fleas. I'm so upset at this point. I feel so terrible for this poor dog, but all I can do is bathe him, get rid of the fleas, and inform the owner that he needs to go to the vet. Whoa, I didn't even think about pet grooming. I bet that can get crazy. I feel bad every time I take my dog to the groomer and there's a small mat somewhere. My cousin is a hairdresser. One time a woman brought in her special needs son. He had some hygiene issues and his ears were covered in blackheads. While all the other hairdressers recoiled in horror, my cousin gritted her teeth and gave that kid the best haircut she could. I really respected my cousin after that. That poor kid. I wonder if his mom just ignored it or if she couldn't do anything about it because of his condition. Way back in the day, my mom was a hairdresser. She told me a story once of this guy coming in who had bird poo all over the top back of his head. Guess he got pooped on and didn't notice or something. When I was an assistant at my first salon right out of school, we had classes every Wednesday night. Well, one week I couldn't find a model in time, so my mentor had someone she knew come in and be my model. So the model comes in, seems perfectly normal. She sits in my chair, I start the consultation and start looking through her hair to see what I'd need to do. Apparently this young lady had not washed her hair in what I'm assuming was weeks, because her hair was so greasy that every time I touched her hair my hand came back drenched in grease. And the smell. Oh man, I'll never forget that smell. It was the worst thing I've ever had the displeasure of working with. I asked my mentor if I could shampoo her before starting and was told that I couldn't. So here I am working on this girl who almost literally has grease dripping from her hair. I must have washed my hands 10 times that night. Needless to say, I had my own model for every class after that one. When my sister was young, elementary school aged, she didn't like to brush her thick hair and it was always a source of grief. My mom took her to get her hair cut, and after the hairdresser tried to brush her hair for a minute, she said that sister needed to brush it herself. So my sister had to sit in the lobby with a brush until the tangles were gone. It was some pretty effective social shaming. LOL. I hated brushing my hair as a kid, but it never got that bad. If it had, I'm pretty sure my mother would have just cut it all off herself. I'm a hairstylist, pretty new still. In school, you can't really turn anyone away. I had a prostitute sit in my chair, tweaked out of her freaking mind, with her pimp telling us to dye her stringy, fried hair blonde and cut it to her chin. She didn't speak for herself at all. She wouldn't even look in the mirror. He gave all the instructions. He definitely had a specific look for her in mind. He was a huge butthole to everyone, and she left the chair to go cry in the bathroom. A classmate went to go check on her and she had just walked out of the door. He left really quick after that. I think about her sometimes and I hope she's okay. I wish I had gotten the chance to make her feel beautiful. So that was a pretty nasty experience, even though I didn't have a chance to start the service. Besides that, I was pregnant throughout school and gagged quite a bit at the ladies who would come in for a wash, blow dry, and style after weeks of not brushing out their hair or washing it. I always suggested braids for these ladies since they obviously for whatever reason chose not to maintain their naturally curly hair, but most refused and would be back in 3-4 weeks for the whole process again. This was a very time consuming process with tons of detangling rats' nests and dreads that invariably ended in 0 tips. There were also really creepy men that would come in for $5 cuts and say very sexual things and enjoyed the shampoo a lot. My school was basically just a mill of free labor and we had to accept every client no matter what, and it sucked. But I'm enjoying more creative freedom now that I have graduated and am in a salon. I still volunteer for events where the homeless get free cuts and there are quite a few very dirty people there, but I don't mind because it's not a daily basis situation like it used to be and I like making people feel good. If you are even remotely thinking that a customer is under the influence of a pimp, call the cops. He is human trafficking. 1-800-373-7888. National Human Trafficking Resource Center. You have met cat poop. Do not leave without commenting amen. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.